But yeah, she's.
Well, I'm gonna sell them for 600. I
Okay.
already sold them for 600. Huh?
That's SpongeBob songs.
No, the turbo.
I have baseball socks on today. They have flowers and baseball.
Oh, so that's drippy SpongeBob. That's drippy.
When I do that, I make warm water.
That's drippy SpongeBob.
You understand?
Okay, so guys, just so my board's not delayed, I'm gonna just do notes on here. That way it doesn't drive me crazy. Just in case I'm asleep out or something, we don't really have it. So we have chapters 4 and 5 to do today. Once we've done chapter 4, we'll take a break in the middle, but once we've done chapters 4 and 5, yeah. Oh, sorry. So actually, I think it's right behind your head. Did you get the review? Yeah. So this is, and I can send you an email that has this like filled out. We're on this side. It's not really all that exciting because it doesn't really have anything on it. Kate, can you get a note card? No. Okay. So you can use both sides of this for the exam, whatever kind you want.
Oh, no, those are cheesy.
Okay, guys.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's talk about chapter 4. There's a ton in chapter 4 as well. That's when we got into our graphing. So on the exam, I do ask you guys to graph a couple of different ways. So I ask you guys to graph using like slope-intercept form, which is probably the way you like the most. So why don't we start with that? So B is where we begin on the y-axis. M is how we move using the slope, moving rise over run. But it needs to be in that y equals mx plus b form. So if you have to solve it, you might want to do that. Hi, welcome back.
No more Rana? No more Rana?
No more Mona. She came back. What if she was like, no, I'm still sick? Like, this is awkward.
But you can take a step outside.
I brought presents for everybody.
Oh, yeah, do you want to maybe get me read? Yeah, so like guys, remember if the screen is too hard to see, you can always move back. So like Landon, if you want to move back, like I know the angle over here is kind of weird. I don't really know how you guys see. So. Yeah, well, right, but okay. Oh, yeah. So this is slope-intercept form. So that's slope-intercept form. Good question, because there's times on the test I'll say write something in slope-intercept form, and you want to know that that's y equals mx plus b. Do we want an example of graphing that way? Okay. Self-explanatory. Not exact, but okay, so let me know though if you end up like, so like 31 and 30 and 31 on this test or on this review are that way. Now the one I do want to do an example with you of is intercepts, because that was definitely something that we weren't as good at, or some of you guys weren't as good at. So graphing by intercepts, oops, this is where I switched that. No. do this multiple times on the test, but understanding what intercept, or the exam, you'll have to do at least once. Graphing by intercepts is something that, like I said, it wasn't something that we did really great on. I mean, it was definitely one that we struggled with a little bit more. If you guys recall, the x-intercept is where y equals 0. And then the y-intercept is where x equals 0. So I'll do a quick example with you guys of this. So let's do so 10x minus 4y equals 20. So that's my equation. It doesn't have to be in slope-intercept form. So it's okay that it's in the form it's in. We actually probably will like it this way. So we're going to find the x and y intercepts, and then we're going to use that to graph it. So this would definitely be something I would suggest putting on my note card that you write that's graphing by intercepts. So if I'm looking for the x-intercept, I'm going to substitute in y is 0. So I'm going to put 0 in for my y. What happens then is the 4 times 0 goes away. We kind of talked about this as like the cover-up method, that you kind of picture that part going away. So I get 10x equals 20. So x ends up being 2 for my x-intercept. So that's going to be a point on my x-axis. And if you want to do a little sketch here, so x is 2, I'm going to put a dot on my x-axis at 2. Then I'm going to figure out my y-intercept. And you do have to do this on the review for the exam, so hopefully you have that little bit of practice. Now I'm putting 0 in for the x. So this goes away. So y ends up being -5. So I didn't go down far enough. But once I have those 2 points, that's enough to draw my line. Oh, sorry. Yeah, just keep moving, Landon. Does that kind of jog your, you learned that, so I mean, hopefully you're like, oh, now I think I'm okay. If you're like looking for practice problems, there are a couple on the exam review that I gave you guys, so 32 and 33 are like that. So those are definitely something you want to practice and put on your note card if you don't think you'll remember. Now, if all else fails and you graph it another way, I can give you some points, but if I asked you to graph by intercepts, you wouldn't get full credit if you didn't use the intercepts. Okay, so then we also talked about the slope formula. So this is another thing I'd put on my note card. Hopefully at this point you know it already, but being able to find the slope of a line. So, and that's from 2 points. We can also use rise over run. Now that's not technically the slope formula, but that's really helpful when we're doing like the graphing, up and over, down and over. Now I want to talk with you guys about 2 specific types of lines that come up, and I know some of you guys ran into them. Actually, oh yeah, you'll find it on the homework if you go that far. is if I have vertical and horizontal lines. So remembering the difference between these two. So maybe I'll mention that here. So if the m is a number over 0 versus m is 0 over a number. So we're talking about what happens when I'm doing slope and I get a number over 0 or I get a 0 over a number. So that little hashtag is a number, so like just any number. Which one is 0 and which one's undefined? Do you guys remember the difference? Yeah, Clayton?
0 is one because the 0 on the top of the undefined is the 0 on the bottom. You can't
Yeah. So this one is 0, very good. So this is going to be a flat line versus this one's considered undefined. Because you can't divide by 0. So remembering the difference between these two. So undefined versus 0. Now undefined is going to be a vertical line versus 0 is going to be flat. 0 fun. Think about slope, dude. So undefined is if I tell you to go sledding off the side of the building, that doesn't look much like a vertical line, I realize now. Any questions there? I do want to talk about those types of lines a little bit more in depth here in a second. But I just want to make sure you guys are okay so far. I'm going to kind of flip off this page in a second. So I'll give you guys a second to make sure. I just don't want to write really tiny in the corner down here. So I'm going to start a new page. And you do need to say undefined for something like this. So, so make sure you're careful about specifying that. All right, are we all good? Can I flip the page? You don't need to. You're still in chapter 4. But, and you can always let me know later if you like need me to go back to something. I wanted to talk to you guys specifically about what happens if we're missing a variable in our equation. So let me give you an equation like y equals 5. Do you guys remember what to do with that? There's a few like this on the exam review. There's just one variable, the other one's missing. And I think a table is easiest for these to remember what to do. So maybe I'll start with that. If I was making a table of values, which one can I typically pick whatever I want for? X. So I'm going to pick like -1, 0, 1, 2. When I go to put X in, what happens? What do we get here?
All the Y's are 5.
All the Y's are 5. So every Y is 5. So if I go to graph this, -1, 5, 0, 5, 1, 5, 2, 5. This is just going to be a flat line at 5. So somehow getting yourself to remember that. Again, it's not going to ask you a ton of questions like these, but this is one of those special cases. I don't want you guys just to get wrong because you forgot. Should that be vertical or horizontal? What if I said, I'm so good at this. What if I said x equals -2? What kind of line do you think that one's going to be? Yeah, go ahead, Clayton.
It's just going to be undefined.
That one's going to be undefined. So x is -2 would just be a vertical line at -2. So the table of values for this one would be all the x's are just -2, and y could be anything. So making sure you're understanding the difference between those. I put them on the same graph. Typically they won't have more than one graph on the same graph paper, but just so that it's a safe space there. Sorry. And then the only other thing that I think from this section we have to cover is talking quickly about function notation. So I'll switch over to that. Sorry, I'm trying to think of. So I could ask you guys 2 questions or multiple questions with these, but if I said with function notation here, there's my equation, f of x equals 5x minus 2. I said find f of negative 3, and then find x when f of x equals negative 2. So these are 2 different parts here. So there's like a part A and a part B. So what am I doing in part A here? F of negative 3. What are we doing with that? What does that negative 3 stand for? Yeah, the x. So we're just going to put x in as negative 3. So 5 times negative 3 is a negative 15, minus 2, so I get a negative 17 there. So in that case, it's telling me to substitute a value in for x. That's what that first one's telling me to do. Then this next one says f of x equals negative 2. What's that asking me to do now? What's that saying? Yeah, go ahead.
You replace that with that foot negative 2.
Yeah, so it's telling me f of x is negative 2, so I'm going to put negative 2 where f of x is. Kind of a weird problem in this case. So we have to solve for x, so what are we going to do? You might just know what it is, but yeah.
0.
It's 0. So you're going to add 2. This will mean 0 equals 5x. I can divide by 5, and then x is just going to be 0. Okay? Questions there? All right, so what I'm going to do now is give you guys a little bit of time to work on your note cards for chapter 4, work on the homework from chapter 4, see if there's anything that you guys are going to get hung up on. We can then take a little break in a little bit. We can maybe, do you guys want to do a fun Kahoot rather than a math one? Yeah, okay, so I'll find a fun Kahoot while you guys are working, and then we'll come back for the second half of chapter 5.